Today I'm speaking with Matt Medved. Matt was the founder of Billboard Dance. Now, I promised myself this podcast would be a fun side project and I wouldn't do a bunch of current music or artist podcast. So instead, Matt and I decided to call this podcast The Future of Music. It is all about fun predictions today. We briefly talked about NFTs, virtual reality concerts, and some massive changes that may be coming to Spotify and all of the other DSPs. Finally, to thank you for checking out the new show, I'm giving away a PlayStation 5. All you have to do is like and subscribe to enter. Details in the comments. Now please welcome Matt Medved to the Welcome Home podcast.
I think NFTs are the future. I think that what we're witnessing right now doesn't happen in everyone's lifetime. We're witnessing the birth of a new creative asset class. And this is just the beginning. This is still the first inning. I think that in the future, many things will be NFTs, and people won't even necessarily think about them as NFTs. I mean, if you look at, for example, NBA Top Shot, which has become a very popular platform for trading. They're called moments, but they're essentially like video versions of basketball trading cards. You don't even need to understand or know what an NFT is to participate in that ecosystem. It's the easiest onboard ramp there is, and I think that plus its integration with VR and AR are a glimpse at the future. I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but I'm just that excited.
Why do you think the internet or social media is kind of divided? Does this just always happen with a big leap, or is this a unique situation? Because I'm seeing artists that I deeply respect that are being hypercritical, and I have other artists that I deeply respect that are all in. Where do you think the divide comes from? Is this just a part of the game when innovation hits this rapidly?
Well, technology has always driven music forward, and change is always met with resistance. I think that people fear what they don't understand. And when innovation happens, it tends to go in cycles. When something booms in the way that the NFT market is currently booming, there are easy targets as well that present themselves. So critics can easily lock on to something. So a lot of the criticism that I've seen regards specific projects but I think those critics need to zoom out a bit and look at the macro picture. I thought there was a good tweet I saw the other day that criticizing NFTs through the lens of individual projects without realizing what a fundamental shift it is on the macro scale is like criticizing the internet back in the 90s and 2000s because of like the viability of like an Ask Jeeves. I think Gary Vee was the one who tweeted that. And that's I think that we're seeing a lot of projects right now that may present themselves as easy targets, and some of them may fail, just like so many of the early internet companies failed. But the internet was the future, and the internet was here to stay and to continue to evolve. And so the idea of digital assets and digital collectibles and digital art and digital ownership and provenance is not going anywhere. In fact, it's going to, in my opinion, continue to grow exponentially over the foreseeable future.
It certainly seems like in the context of 2021, when nobody's talking about this 30 days ago and everyone's talking about it, that would naturally cause red flags. And anytime there's mania, there is almost, or rightfully so, a pushback, because that pushback improves the product. That puts more pressure on the quality of the product and the innovation. So, but it is very strange seeing, artists, we're innovators, and there's still almost a debate online. I definitely expected our fellow musician friends would be almost all in on this, and maybe the critics would be, a Forbes reporter or something.
Well, I think that, like I said, people often fear what they don't understand, and they tend to focus on the financials rather than the fundamentals. To me, the price that some NFTs are commanding, the ability to make, the amount of money you can make off NFTs is the least interesting thing about it. And I've said the same thing about Bitcoin's price before, because To me, this feels like a little bit of deja vu. I got into the crypto space back in 2013. Young Matthew, didn't have much capital to work with. Bought a Bitcoin at $900. Watched it. It was a lot of money. I mean, I'm like watched it promptly crash to $200. Uh, Shook my faith, but I held and stayed the course. Then fast forward, I was in the red for 4 years. Fast forward to the boom in 2017, 2018, and I saw the exact same thing happen with the hype cycles and the criticisms and the disbelief and the back and forth, but exponentially magnified. And then the same thing happened. You got the correction, and now we're in the third one that I've been a part of, that I've witnessed. I know there were more before I got involved in the ecosystem. And at this point, it's all predictable to me, except now what you're seeing this time when it comes to Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies is institutional buy-in from the same exact institutions that were doubting it and criticizing it and the like. And so this is still the first NFT boom. So what I'm seeing from the creative community reminds me a lot of what I saw from the financial sector during those previous booms. And I think that there will be a similar trajectory of eventual adoption. And to me, I think that we tend to focus too much on the biggest headlines of it, whether it's and the debate focuses on, was this drop worth this amount of money? Oh, could people buy into this one? Without realizing that beneath the surface of yes, those are the outliers, those are the big ones, sure, but day to day, there are a ton of digital artists, 3D artists, music, soon to be more music artists, who are now, they may not be getting eye-popping 6-figure, 7-figure sales, but they are earning a living on their own terms. And I think that's a really important thing and distinction. One example I like to give is the artist Ness Graphics, who I met on Clubhouse. Big fan of his work. He used to make touring visuals for some of the biggest artists in music. For example, he worked on the touring visuals for Travis Scott's Astroworld. He did tour visuals for Lil Nas X, for Martin Garrix. The list goes on. And, he's highly regarded in that sector. But again, that's client work. That's commission work. You're paid to solve a problem, and you're paid to, it tends not to be the most lucrative of ventures. Nobody gets into this space. Nobody pursues a career as a digital 3D artist for the money. They do it for the passion, which is why I think, by the way, this is such a special community, because it's all comprised of true creatives largely comprised of true creatives who got into it for the right reasons. But so, for this example of Ness Graphics, I think he's a great illustrative example. Operating at really the top of that game, working with the top names, but still he wasn't able to fully make his creative vision his career, because he was still working for other people. He was still putting his services, his services at the employ of others, and he also, wasn't treated as an equal creative partner in it. Most people don't know that Ness Graphics made those, and so now it's been amazing to watch him go from doing that to creating his own one of one 3D artwork pieces. Started selling them on Super Rare, and I watched him go from 1 to 2 Ether per piece to 15 to 20, and now he's earning much more than he was with the previous client work, and he's doing it with his own creative vision. And I think he actually has a great perspective on it, because he's like, I'm still going to do client work. Obviously, I have great relationships in there, but now I can choose. I can do it on my own terms. And that's a really fundamental shift for a creative. And it's something that 3D and digital artists weren't able to do in the same way as their more traditional counterparts up until recently. And so if you think about it, what artists like him were doing they were able to make their art a service. They were able to solve a problem. They were able to fill a commission. But now they can make their 3D digital art into a good, and they can sell that good to people who want to collect it, and they can do that for a much higher price point, and one that rewards their artistry more fairly. And I think that it's a similar fundamental shift with music. We up until there's the founder of Nifty Gateway, one of the co-founders, Duncan Cox Foster. He said one time, and I really liked how he put it. There are two ways for people to make money from their art. They can charge people to consume it, or they can sell it and let people collect it. Prior to NFTs, only the former was possible for musicians, and they usually get paid peanuts. Now the latter is possible. So we've gone back to, we now have a market where a musician can sell music as a good. And it's proven to be a game changer for direct monetization of creativity.
I loved one part. You said the thing that interested you least in NFTs was the numbers, the big numbers, the headlines, 1 million, 6 figures. And I've had Andreas Antonopoulos on the podcast as well, and he's a Bitcoin OG. And the first thing he told me, he says, the thing that excites me least about what I do is these price cycles, and they become predictable and we don't pay attention. So it was really interesting how you said that, and you could almost tell the authentic passion in the people that, of course, it is, those headlines are needed maybe for mainstream adoption. People need to know that there is a financial gain long term, but the community seems to actually just really care about this technology and this idea. It's almost a political or philosophical mission over a financial gain. I don't want to go too simple, but for someone who's just tuned in, what is an NFT in the context of music?
Sure. So just to make things abundantly clear, NFT refers to non-fungible token. Fungibility just means that it can be immediately pegged to like another currency or price point. For example, Bitcoin is a fungible token that exists on the blockchain. Now, just a little basic. Blockchain is the technology that Bitcoin pioneered. It creates a digital immutable ledger where transactions can be recorded, fully transparent, can't be tampered with, and can be traced. Legitimacy can be proven. It's all out there. And so that ledger of transactions, that the Ethereum is the cryptocurrency that most of the NFT space is built off of, or the ecosystem is built off of. Ethereum took what the technology that Bitcoin established and added a thing called smart contracts. So smart contracts are programmable, and they allow you to basically program certain things into these exchanges of value. So the easiest example is we all know how an escrow service works, right? With Ethereum, you can essentially set up like a digital escrow service so that when a certain parameter is met, the funds are released, and it's all done automated, and it can't be tampered with, it can't be fake. Anyway, Ethereum is the blockchain and the cryptocurrency ecosystem on which most of the NFTs that we're talking about are built. Not all of them, but most of them. So an NFT, non-fungible token. Bitcoin and Ethereum and most other cryptocurrencies are fungible. They can, any time of any day, you can find out how many euros a Bitcoin is worth, how many Japanese yen a Bitcoin is worth, how many US dollars a Bitcoin is worth. A non-fungible token, there isn't that direct pegging to a currency. It's a unique, the way to think about it is it's a unique digital asset on the blockchain. And the value is determined the way that we determine value for many things in our daily lives. So we, for example, accept that art has value. There's an entire market that goes back generations for the traditional art market based on the idea of provenance and based on the idea that artwork has value because of its rarity and scarcity and the cultural cachet that it carries. That's why an Andy Warhol commands the prices that it does. He's not around to make anymore. He obviously has a very high standing in our cultural viewpoint, and the same goes for assets on the blockchain. A great way of thinking about it is a digital collectible. We accept, for example, that trading cards have value. Long before I was born, a rookie Mickey Mantle card would command 6 to 7 figures, now 7 figures, but and we've accepted for a long time that this piece of cardstock has value, even though it's not so different from other pieces of cardstock that don't have value when you think about it. It didn't cost much to produce this card, but we accept that it has value because of its scarcity, its rarity, and the cultural cachet that it carries. And so it's the same thing with a digital asset like an NFT, which is why you are now seeing marketplaces and economies being built there. Digital art has obviously been exploding, but so has the collectible space with NBA Top Shot. It's a great example. And it's going to continue. And it's going to, I think, disrupt every creative industry. When Pokemon when they drop their NFT, it's game over. Like, think about Pokemon Go, which commanded the attention. It was of millions and millions and millions of users, and they were collecting things that were digital in nature. And those things largely didn't even have like tangible money value. But now you can actually make money doing this. In fact, a lot of people are making a lot of money doing this. And one thing that I always like to say and to think about is the nice thing about an NFT compared to a digital collectible is you can't damage it from storing it improperly. You can transfer it with relative ease anywhere in the world pretty quickly. And perhaps the most exciting thing is that because of those smart contracts on Ethereum that I mentioned, you can program them so that they continue to give value. They continue to give value to their creators in perpetuity. So one of the biggest game changers in the art world is that it's now in the crypto art world pretty much an industry standard for the creator of a digital artwork to get 10 to 20% of all secondary market sales in perpetuity for their lifetime. Wow. So that means, for example, if I discover a young artist, let's say if I discover your secret Instagram and I've like, oh, you've been actually crushing it on like your ink and pen drawings, and I buy one of yours, your drawings for an ether, or like about $1,700 or whatever it is now. It's been rising today, but and then let's say you blow up and you become a sensation of the art world, and I sell that for 10 times what I paid for it, or 20 times what I paid for it. You're going to get 10% or 20% of that sale price. So you're going to share in the value that your career ascension has created. And you don't have to wait on some bureaucratic industry body to send you those royalties. It's done automatically through the smart contracts with the blockchain. It'll pop up in your wallet. So that's, I think, to me, one of the most exciting things about this technology's application to the creative space, music as well, because creators can share in that value and continue to get royalties with future sales.
See, I had no idea that there was this royalty smart contract. That's pretty incredible. Imagine an up-and-coming artist that you believe in, a musician, and if you could earn, or if they could earn when they blow up, that's very, very interesting. Are there, today, for the musician listening right now, are there technical restraints on sound quality? Can I upload a 45-minute album? Just technically, do we have restraints for making an NFT album or song?
not technical in the sense that like it needs to be a certain bit rate, it needs to be a certain whatever. It can you can in theory you can pretty much tokenize anything, but there are obviously restraints around all the same laws with copyright and IP still apply. So, if you've got an uncleared sample and you sell a music NFT, the rightful owner of that sample could have a legal claim to that. You still got to play by those same rules. But you can so the same copyright rules apply, and obviously it is a it is a it is a truth that the laws are always at least 10 to 15 years behind the technology. Like the books are always behind the technology; they always have to catch up. So that's something that the crypto space has always dealt with. Um, and so it's there are still you can't just create an NFT of someone else's song and put it up and profit. That'll be an issue. But in terms of actual technical specs, not really. It's kind of like if what you want, if you build it, like if that's what you want, that's what it can be, and that's what I think is kind of cool. One thing that I think is super inspiring is that I think that NFTs for creatives, they change the creative canvas a bit. This is something I've had some good conversations with guys like Blau, Steve Aoki, RAC about in the past. Is you know I'm as a music producer myself. I always, like when I'm making music, I always have had in the back of my mind, like, okay, well, if I really want to release this, it's got to be a certain length, probably. It's got to be formulated a certain way so that, like, a streaming service, it'll do well on a streaming service. It may be DJs being able to play it as a calculus. There are certain, especially in dance music, there are certain limitations to the canvas if I want it to be something that's commercially viable. Obviously, I can make whatever I want, but if I wanted it to be commercially viable, there were certain limitations. And what's cool is those are kind of out the window now. One of the great examples, the example that really inspired me when I first was getting into NFTs. By the way, Blau has been a pioneer in the space, and I'm fortunate to call him a friend. And he and I had kind of like my first real like conversation about NFTs was with him when I saw what he was doing at the end of last year. I reached out and I remember his collaboration with Slime Sunday, the visual artist, was really inspiring to me because it was a number of shorter form music pieces and loops, 30 seconds to a minute and a half, paired with really compelling visuals. And I loved it because I am someone who has I have a lot of like, projects that I've worked on with really cool loops and ideas. Not all of them made sense to turn into a full song. And then even, you have another layer. It's like, did they make sense? I have like all these like cool techno loops, like, did they make sense to release techno as Matt Medved when like, on a streaming service when like, the remixes I'm known for are poppier. And so they just kind of chilled, and there were some that I really liked. And now they can kind of take on a life of their own as, when paired with like a cool visual. And I'm actually working on a collaboration right now with an amazing visual artist around some of those ideas that I was able to flesh out a bit, and I'm super excited to see them be able to stand on their own and see the light of day.
That's interesting how you're talking about a different canvas. Another thing I totally didn't even think about. And also, I know Blau gets a lot of credit right now. I'm going to give him one more piece of credit. It would have been 2017. I was in Vegas playing at Marquee Nightclub. He picked me up and said, hey, come to my place. Ended up doing a remix for him. And I'm not joking. 2017, he was in the car on speakerphone talking about Bitcoin in depth.
Oh, yeah.
And I literally was in the backseat saying, this guy's a nerd. And this is the first time I met him. I'm like, this guy's nerdier than I thought. I didn't know what Bitcoin was. This was not a mainstream conversation. And I know Blau's getting a lot of credit right now, but people should really be aware that he did not jump on the wave. This dude has been caring about this for half a decade plus, and I've heard him in person speaking about this when it was not cool to have these conversations. So I'm glad he's getting the credit he deserves, and I really hope people know it wasn't a wave jump for this dude. He has been passionate about this for years and years in private. Um, Shifting a little bit to art collecting versus music. When I think about art, and I could be wrong, I believe that when someone pays a high price for art, there is a baked in status element. I believe there's an element of I own this piece, I show it off, there is status involved that I am the owner of this expensive, the price that comes in to the status conversation. And perhaps I would imagine with NFT art, there will be some form of like Instagram style where you have a blue check on the NFT that yours is a one of whatever. I just feel like for somebody to invest, you and I can have the conversation of investing in an artist or looking at it as a collectible that can be worth something. But the average person, I feel like a status element. You have to show off your piece of art in some form of an Instagram for NFTs or something. Um, do you see that some form of status needs to be adopted, some way to easily show off what you have, for the average person to spend $100 on this so they could show that off? Or am I thinking too deeply into that?
You're not thinking too deeply. And what I think, one of the things I always say is, do you spend more time these days looking at your screen or at your walls?
Exactly.
Yeah. So we all
Screen all
spend
day.
we all looking at our screens. And Instagram is, I'm sharing everything I collect to Instagram, but that's just tipping our feet in the water. What's going to happen is there are incredible projects in the works right now, in all of these blockchain based like VR, AR worlds. We call it the metaverse. So in the not so distant future, you're going to literally be able to put on your VR headset, or even better, just put on your AR glasses, and you'll be able to access you'll be able to basically type in a coordinate, and you're going to be able to. You can already do this. It's just not as easy or as seamless as it is. But you can go and view galleries of crypto art that collectors have already put on. That already exist. There's a museum of crypto art curated by a guy named Pablo, who's an amazing collector in the space. So there's that, but I think you touch on, so like the answer is like 100%, and what's amazing is they're going to get seen by more eyeballs than they would be seen just on your wall. And so the metaverse is like the next step in terms of, being able to share your collection with the world. I think you raise a really good point, because a lot of people have questioned the motives of some of these collectors, and I've been fortunate enough to get to know some of the big collectors in the space in my relatively brief time in it. But a lot of them are, a lot of them are people who did quite well in crypto, so they have a lot of means when it comes to the crypto space. They're believers in that technology. They're excited to see the technology spreading and gaining more widespread adoption. And they're also excited to be able to kind of make a cultural impact rather than just a financial impact. Because I think a lot of these collectors were kind of anonymous before this. And collecting in the crypto art space is a way for them to support artists they believe in, contribute to the community, gain a bit of an identity in the community, and also, it's gain that there is a status element. It's not so different than patrons of the traditional art world. We all know the some of the wealthiest individuals, tend to also be big art collectors, and I think there are similar motivations there. But one thing that I will say is that it has been amazing to see how supportive and collaborative this creative community is. And what's so cool is I see for those big collectors are also picking up rising artists for 1 ether or less, and it's all they're very much invested in the community, and a lot of times when they make these big eye-popping sales, they go right back and reinvest those right back into the community. And it's really cool too because uh, there is a democratization of access now. Anyone can be a collector. If I wanted to go to the fine art world and become a collector, I would have to, in the traditional world, in the physical world, there are some steps I'd have to take. It's not impossible, but like I'd have to have a certain amount of money at the table. I'd have to talk to the right gallerists. I have to talk to the right curators, dealers, etc. And whereas anyone can be a collector in the digital art space, and what's amazing is artists themselves can be collectors and are collectors in the space. And so there's an amazing artist named Fuocious, who I've interviewed, and I've also collected a couple of their works. And he's 18 years old, one of the hottest artists in the space, and he regularly will pick up rising artists, especially young artists that he sees, and he'll tweet about them, he'll put them on, they'll get so super excited, and it actually can move the needle for them and their careers. He actually just did a nifty gateway drop with a bunch of his friends, all of whom are good artists, but he really helped to raise their profile. Odious, Parrot, Jonathan Wolf, and they made life-changing money off of it. And that spirit of collaboration versus competition is one of my favorite things about the space. And it extends from the artists to the creators, to the collectors, to the curators. Everyone is supporting each other. When an artist in the community has a drop, you see all these other artists pushing it and supporting it, and it's like you can't imagine that happening in the music space of everyone pushing each other's releases. I mean, you see it sometimes with friends, but like it's such a and then like they'll Clubhouse and Twitter are two hugely important platforms for the NFT community. And one trend that I've really enjoyed seeing is they'll when someone has a drop, they'll create like a Clubhouse room, to kind of build the anticipation, awareness, and all that. And all these artists will drop in to pay their respects, give their compliments, hype each other up. It's just such a like collaborative space, and a positive and welcoming space. And that is something that I feel very strongly needs to be protected, as a lot of new players, big names, and big money and brands enter the space.
It's interesting. Earlier, we talked about the divide online because there are points of attack. And for me, one of the points of attack is purchasing an item only to be able to show it on Instagram or Twitter. There's a degraded, blurry Twitter version. They don't respect the quality of it. And people say, wait, you're posting on a free social network. And in my head, I thought, how cool would it be if there was an NFT exclusive Instagram style app that showed how rare your item was? How cool would it be if Jay-Z, I could go to @Jay-Z on this social network and I see that he owns this piece and I'm like, yo, this is crazy. I felt like that would be a brilliant adoption to end that attack. And I'm sure it's already being in the works. But then
Yeah.
you brought up AR,
Yeah.
because I've been reading about Apple Glass coming in the next few years and the idea of glasses having simple AR, a map, notifications, your time, whatever. But I saw you retweeted something where the guy was holding his card, his NFT, and I feel like the attacks or the points of attack are looking through the lens of March 9th, 2021. The future would make these attacks almost laughable in a sense,
Yeah, and by the way, there is an app that's seeking to do the sort of like the Instagram thing. It's called Showroom. I'm not an expert in it, but I know it's certainly respected by the space. It's worth checking out. I know they're trying to do sort of like an Instagram style kind of like format to like your collection and sharing what you're doing. But yeah, there's so much excitement and innovation in the space right now, and like what I always when I I think a lot of people who are on the side of the fence, who are super excited about it and think it's the future, find themselves like going down the rabbit hole and spending tons of time. Like, I would say that in the past month, there were weekends where I didn't leave my apartment and all I did was research NFTs. And I think that, when I think about why it has captured the moment and captured the imagination so much, to me, I can speak from my own experience. Like, I obviously believed in, the blockchain technology, crypto, like the potential of that technology, but I'm not a finance guy, and I found it difficult for me to pay attention during the off years and the lulls in that space, just because financial markets aren't what like get me excited to wake up in the morning. I recognize their importance. I've learned a lot actually by dabbling in the crypto space, but I'm not a finance guy at the end of the day. I was more focused on art and music and culture. And now that this technology is revolutionizing the financial model for artists and culture creators, I think it is one of the most exciting and significant developments in my lifetime. And the exciting thing is that we're just in the first inning. So for those of you who feel like you missed out on Bitcoin, I mean, I felt like I missed out in 2013. Like, I thought I was late. Everything's relative. I mean, if you're in the space right now, you're still in a macro scale an early adopter. But if you feel that way, this is still the earliest days for NFTs. They've only existed for a few years. This is the first boom, and I would just always recommend for those looking to get in the space, you don't need to go big. I bought a lot of NFTs for under $100. There's a great platform called Bitski that's really doing some great work with rising artists, and you can get very affordable entry points on rising artists there, and they could go on to become the next Fuocius. And the other thing too is, I always say, like, I only collect art that I want, that I like. Like, obviously I'm aware of market dynamics, but I'm never picking something up just because I intend to flip it. If the value of all of my art went to zero, I'd be fine, because another big rule is never invest more than you can afford to lose. But B, I genuinely like the art I've collected. So I enjoy looking at it. I enjoy having it. I enjoy knowing that I supported that artist directly. And those are just kind of like guiding principles I always say for people who are looking to get into the space. Obviously, there are a lot of people who are doing the hypebeast sneaker flip game right now, and I'm sure they're making money. I have no judgment on that. Like, that's if someone does that and makes enough money hustling like that to put their dream into motion, like, I'm not going to judge that, because at the end of the day, they're also contributing to the ecosystem, and their artists are getting paid. But me personally, I'm a long ball game, kind of guy. Like, I'm very long on this it really comes down to the fact that, like, the fact that you can make money off this, like it is the least exciting thing about it. I think the most exciting thing is that artists can now create direct income streams, and they don't need to battle algorithms and ad placements to reach a fraction of their fans. I think that there's a great piece. I'm blanking on the author name right now, but it's called 1,000 True Fans. And
Kevin
the
Kelly.
idea, yes, Kevin Kelly, thank you. And the idea is that you don't need millions of fans to be successful as a creator. You just need 1,000 true fans who will buy what you put out, who will support you in whatever you do. And the issue is that we, as they put it, the internet took a detour, and we suddenly made centralized social platforms like Facebook, Instagram, etc. Our go-to hub for interacting with our favorite creators, and they're hogging the majority of value, and they're putting algorithms in the way of reach. They're obviously putting ads in the way. They're forcing you to pay to play, And it's a really difficult landscape for artists. And the same goes for the streaming services. When obviously Blau's album auction made a ton of news, but and rightfully so. But I was really excited too when obviously it didn't have the same price tag, but when he did the first tokenized song, on Nifty Gateway, and he sold $175,000 of NFTs for that one song immediately, new release. Like that's incredible. Do you know how many streams you would need to make $175,000 off a song?
If someone had the streaming calculator, they would be appalled with the amount of streams they need.
And it's just a great example. That there you go. That's 1,000 fans who are willing to pay $175 to support their favorite artist, or it's $175 to support doing 1,000, whatever the calculus. But you don't need the millions and millions that you needed to eke out a decent return. And this is super exciting for smaller, mid-tier artists who have built communities around their work and now have a path to sustainability and success without having to compromise their artistic integrity for commercial reasons. And to me, it's just absolutely game changing. And look, we're going to see, obviously the market isn't going to stay the way it is right now forever. We're definitely going through a boom. It's going to get even bigger because I know there are huge names preparing to enter the space. You're going to get sick of the word NFT if you're not already. And look, there will certainly at some point be a correction, just like there was in all of the booms I've been through. But the floor always rose every time. And long term, you see the trajectory. There's a thing called network effect, and that's what's happening right now. And that's why I've also, when I started posting about NFTs and getting really involved in the space, a lot of artists reached out to me and asked about how they could get involved, and I always said, look, you need to get in tune and get in touch with the community, because the community lies at the heart of the space. They can tell whether you're in it for a cash grab or whether you're in it to create culture and to contribute. And plenty will make cash grabs, but they won't have longevity. And if you want to build a career with longevity, you have to respect and reinvest in that community. And that's why I always tell artists, big names and down to small ones, I'm always like, start as a collector. Just start picking up pieces you like. Give support to artists. That's what this is really all about. And you'll also discover artists you want to work with that way too. Treat artists, visual artists, like the equal creative collaborator that they are. Make, when I announce my NFT collab, it's going to be Medved X artist. We're both going to have our names on it, and it's going to be a 50-50 split. That's the baseline. That's what the community expects, and it's what the community deserves. And I just think it's so exciting. It's just so exciting and empowering for so many digital artists who never dreamed they would be in a position to create on their own terms and be able to make a comfortable living doing so.
We talked a little bit about, at least my theory, for the need of status in terms of showing off art. I really do believe that the age of Instagram, the age of art collectors, I really believe once there is that startup that takes off, whatever this Instagram is or whatever the AR is, where you could see what someone owns and it creates almost an envy and excitement. What do they have? I believe that makes a lot of sense in terms of art pieces and people's willingness to invest. Shifting back to music, my experience with music is deeply personal. No one cares what I'm streaming when I'm on the treadmill. The only thing I care about is my Spotify playlist being there when I click it and an easy user experience that isn't filled with bugs. So is there a way of incorporating a status element into music collection? And beyond that, even if it's not about status and an artist is selling a $10 NFT single, don't we need a streaming platform that can compete with the best ones so they can enjoy what they just paid for?
Well, when it comes to streaming on the blockchain, check out Audius. Great project. I have a number of friends over there who are doing great work, like Clayton and Cooper, and it's amazing to see what they've done. Shout out to Jesse Grushak and Ujo, who's been he's really did a lot of laying down groundwork for music and blockchain. It's interesting because I think there is that aspect, and one thing that I've also I got a question in a recent Clubhouse room where someone asked, what motivation does a fan have for purchasing a music NFT aside from flipping it for financial gain? And I said, well, why do you buy merch from your favorite artist? You probably don't plan to sell that. It's about, and there is a little bit, there is kind of that status thing, right? It's like, I want to show that I'm a fan. I'm excited to wear this. Sometimes these merch drops are sell out really quickly, and it's like there's a point of pride of being like, I've got this. But you know what's so cool is that NFTs, there's a huge, that's just scratching the surface. There's a huge community tie-in. And so you can now, as an artist, like for example, Blau is planning to do this with his NFTs, and I don't know how much he's announced, but like for example, owning a specific NFT of his could mean like you have backstage access at his shows no matter what. Like if you're like you've got like that super fan NFT, boom, or artists can do that. They can really like incentivize their fan base and add bonuses and things. Be like, oh, like you bought the NFT of my song, like you are going to have access to all these exclusive meet and greets, access, merchandise drops, special concerts or streaming things for fans. And the amazing thing is there's no worry about forgery, fraud, fake. You can immutably prove who owns that NFT on the blockchain.
Does Spotify and Apple have to embrace this, or like the startups you mentioned, is in 5 years there's a new startup and it has nothing to do with our two big DSPs today? Or are they having meetings behind closed doors having these conversations?
Well, I'm sure they're having conversations about NFTs this month because anyone who's paying attention is. But that's a good question. I think a lot of times people think about things as an or when it's really an and. Like, I think especially in the foreseeable future, people are going to want to have streaming at their fingertips. But that's not going to be the only way people consume music from fans. I mean, yeah, there's a difference between passive listening and supporting as a fan. For example, some people are just a lot of people actually, because this is something that I always think about. I always have to remind myself that there's a huge learning curve to this crypto world. That I've been aware of this technology for 8 years now. So there's a certain amount of it that's like, I'm just like, oh, this makes sense, and then I realize, oh, like it's a learning curve. The same thing goes, and it's a bit of a bubble. Like I think it's when you work inside it or you're active inside it, you think people are more into it. The general public is more into it and more knowledgeable than they really are. To us, it seems like NFTs are everyone's talking about them, and to a certain degree there are. But like remember, there's only more people are off Twitter than on it by a much larger percentage. Like there are still a ton of people who have no idea any of this exists. But the other thing the point I want to make is the same thing exists in the music space. Like I always have, as someone who like lives, breathes, eats, sleeps music, I always assumed like everyone's a big music fan, And then I realized a lot of people are not music fans. They just like to have a backing track. They like to have some music in the background depending on what their activities are. And that's why moods and event and occasions and like all those type playlists do so well. The streaming service. People don't necessarily want to hear the specific Boards of Canada album. They want chill vibes. And that's why there's a playlist on Spotify called Chill Vibes. People want music to go to sleep or music to study to. They want road trip soundtracks. They don't want to necessarily, they're not looking to necessarily buy something. They're just looking to passively listen and consume, and the streaming services will be there for them. You know, I don't think I think the idea of cloud-based streaming, who knows what the future holds, but I think that it's not like everyone is suddenly gonna abandon the streaming services and go to NFTs, but there is now a new route for fans, and I mean fans. Like, because there's a difference. We talked about this before. There's a difference between a passive listen on a playlist and someone who's gonna go buy your merch and go to your show. Now those fans have a new way to support, collect, and share in the value of their favorite artists. And that's super exciting. That's super exciting. And one thing that Justin Blau always talks about too is, when he can see, like, you get some analytics on the streaming services, but like, he can't see who's listening to his music, really. He can't know exactly who. Whereas he can see exactly who is purchasing his NFTs. He really can. And he can build that community, and he's not reliant on this other third-party intermediary platform, hoarding and using the data to their advantage. So look, like, I think for the foreseeable future, it's more of an and than an or. But I think that even just the knowledge that this exists will change the conversations. Like, one really exciting thing I saw is I think visual artists are going to be able to charge more for their work now, just across the board, whether they're making NFTs or not. Just because there are enough visual artists who are making better money doing NFTs that it'll be supply and demand. And it's like, look, a lot of them are still open to client work, but it needs to be worth their while. And I think that that's going to change the landscape of that market. And I think something similar will happen in the music space too, because now look, I think I don't like to speak in absolute statements. I think certain things make sense for different artists at different times. But there were already a lot of reasons why you don't need a record label in 2020, and this is a huge reason why you don't need one in 2021.
So, yeah, it's very interesting. I've seen Spotify has certain tabs where you can now purchase merch through that app, through that artist profile. You could click out to get ticket links. Who knows if in 5 years they say, you know what, there might be a way to purchase an artist's song as an NFT and you can use it like any of our other records. But also going on that major label conversation, going on what Justin has been able to do. Justin's been able to do that because he doesn't have a major that's calling him right now. He's an independent artist, and he crafted his career brilliantly for a moment like this. But for myself, I'm a signed artist. And for other signed artists, even if it's a small independent all the way up to a major, if you're a fly on the wall in a major record label office right now, are the conversations now, how do we bake in NFTs into our recording contracts? What are the labels going to do about this?
Yeah, I mean, currently NFTs generally largely aren't, I mean, obviously every contract's different, but largely are not covered by normal record label contracts. If you're in a 360 deal, obviously it would apply. But yeah, I'm sure that that's going to be a conversational point. But now that people know the financial potential there, I think the labels are going to have to offer more to get a piece of that. And that's a good thing for artists. Look, and I want to qualify my previous statement when I said you don't need a label. I think for many artists don't need a label. I think some artists do, and there's no value judgment one way or another. Obviously, there are some really great labels out there that have done incredible work at developing artists, and it's a good thing when artists have options. Let's just put it that way. It's a good thing when artists have options, and this is a super empowering moment for artists. And some artists, I spoke with an artist recently who is finally out of the major label system and is so excited about the space because they have no intention of going back there. And this is a really viable route for them. Other artists may decide that they want to engage with that system, but perhaps more on their own terms. And then others may say, look, I love my label, but if they're going to take a percentage of this, I'm going to need this much of an advance or this much support, and that's a good thing too. So there's no like right or wrong way. I'm not an anti-label guy, I'm just a pro artist guy.
When I spoke to Andreas Antonopoulos, I asked him about his biggest concern for Bitcoin being mainstream. Everyone has it in their phone. That's how we make payments. And he told me, he said, I have zero fears about the technology.
Yeah.
My only fear is the pesky humans. That's what he said. And what he was talking about was the nature of mania, the nature of attracting crowds that are in it for financial gain, like a stock market play, not a technology philosophy. Also, he told me a crazy story where he was offered like $500,000 to tweet an ICO, and he's
Yeah.
talking about the nature of these altcoins and what they become. So I imagine you don't fear the technology. This is the future. You don't fear the artists with pure intentions, but are you afraid of the wrong crowd putting a bad taste in people's mouths with this NFT boom?
100%. But again, like I think it's always happened with the adoption of new technology. Look at the dot-com bubble. Like there were a ton of like scams and half-baked companies that saw it as a cash grab, and a lot of people lost money. A lot of companies went to zero, but it also produced Facebook, Amazon, Twitter, like Google, Microsoft, like it's or if it didn't produce those companies immediately, like it was the precursor to those companies. So I think it's only natural. It's just human nature that like there are always going to be bad actors and people with profiteering motives who are going to try and jump on the latest technology to make a buck. And that's why I think it's so important to have these conversations and ensure that people work with the right people. Like people who are interested in getting into the space for the right reasons, get connected with the right partners, and don't get taken advantage of. Look, like 2017, 2018, the ICO boom, like, that we knew what was like, I saw it and I was like, this isn't going to end well for a lot of people. But, for every ICO that went to zero, or a couple of those, there's also innovative new technology. I mean, now look at like the decentralized finance space. DeFi, has created some incredible projects. Some of those have their roots in that period, and so again, it's the if you go into this as an investor, go in, and obviously this is not financial advice, but I just my own perception of from my experience is go into this as go into this with the understanding that like you're participating in a new sector, and like any new sector, the majority of projects are going to fail, but it's the sector itself. If there's potential there, and there clearly, in my opinion, is, will be on an upward trajectory due to network effect, and each of the booms and busts along the way will just raise the floor for mainstream adoption and awareness. As I said, I've seen it with the crypto space. You're seeing it in the cannabis space. Like it's whenever there's a new sector, a new market, and the NFT space is no different. Obviously, the waters are rising quicker than many thought they would, and it's definitely a concern. It's definitely, I don't want people, I think there's so much potential. As someone who I am a believer in the technology as a way to really empower creatives and creators, and ensure they're paid fairly. And so I also think there's massive political and economic, what's the word, considerations and potential for getting the unbanked into, for getting them into the global financial system, via cryptocurrencies and the like, Venezuela is like one of the top in Bitcoin mining by hash rate right now, which is wild, but it makes total sense. I used to work in Nigeria, and like Nigeria, Bitcoin is going nuts right now, because there's so much corruption in the government, and they can actually store their money somewhere where it can't be siphoned off and taken. And I'm a firm, let me put it this way, I'm a firm believer, big picture, in the technology. So of course, I am concerned that a new entrant to the space, someone who's not used this technology before, could get burned and get and have a negative perception of NFTs and the crypto space because of that. I certainly don't want that to happen. I certainly don't want that to happen. Unfortunately, it tends to whenever there's new technology. We've seen this time and time again. But I think there are some really good people in the space too who are trying to educate and bring people in and work with the right people. So yeah, it's definitely something. It's definitely we're all thinking about it. We're all thinking about it, and if anyone who's listening, would like some resources or I'm hesitant to just throw out any names because it really depends on what your project is, But if someone reaches out, I might be able to help connect them with the right person. So
You talked about Venezuela. It's funny. Andreas also brought that up. He said, I'm Canadian. He said, the problem with Canadians and North Americans is they don't realize that hyperinflation isn't rare. It's the norm.
Mm-hmm.
And he was talking about all these countries that had these hyperinflation moments and why crypto is so important to create your life savings, put your pension in various ways. And learning about the global impacts of crypto was why I became so motivated on it. So I wanted to shift to two more current predictions to wrap up our conversation. We went deep in NFTs. It's so fascinating. It's funny because we went deep, but we also barely even scratched the surface. There's so many other places people could go to.
And it's moving so fast. It's moving so fast.
I have two other future predictions that I want to ask you about. They're both a little bit more near, within 5 years. And one is about DSPs eating into editorials and socials. Do you think Spotify, Apple starts introducing social features, maybe music videos, maybe status updates? And do you think the editorials that we know and love, Billboard Dance being one of them, slowly starts getting eaten by a Spotify or an Apple Music where you could get your song, your news, and a video on a DSP? Is that a worthy prediction?
It's going to be interesting to see. I mean, I had a really interesting conversation about this recently. To me, obviously, those platforms have already, I think, become the front lines for music discovery, and it's only a matter of time before they are for discussion too. I think, gone are the days when really any music publications coverage could move the needle on streams for a song. I think that that no Billboard Dance premiere is, and that because I know the back end, and I'm not singling out Billboard Dance. I'm saying literally no editorial premiere is going to have the same streaming impact as a prime playlist placement. It's more, but where there is, but I still think it's very important because storytelling is what can turn passive casual listeners into fans. And I don't think that the streaming platforms are doing a great job of storytelling on their native platforms currently. I think, but I think they recognize this, and I think there's plenty in the works for editorial on streaming. I know, for example, Amazon Music just hired Raymond Roker as their head of editorial, super, an OG in the dance music scene and beyond, done amazing work. Just an incredible guy. So, I think they understand that. I think that largely, I mean, it's in their interest to keep people on platform, right? So I think they're going to find ways to do that.
Totally agree. I think we're going to start seeing those changes. It's very interesting to see what editorials will be in 5 years and in terms of music and what streaming allows. We saw the Joe Rogan podcast. Now you can stream video on Spotify. I never thought they would introduce that. And that's a slippery slope. Next thing you know, if Drake wants to premiere his song on Spotify, they might make that exception and then things trickle off. Another question. This is not shameless promo, but it has to set up the question. So I recently released a song, and last week it was the most added record to Canadian Top 40 radio. And while that was a really meaningful moment for me and everyone was excited about all the stations in Canada playing it, in the back of my head, I felt like radio impact hasn't moved the needle as much as it did maybe several years ago. So this is a radio question. How much longer will radio move the needle for songs?
Again,
If it
it's
does today.
yeah, no, it's still important because again, like it's always an and versus an or, right? So there are so many people out there who literally like that's how they consume music. They turn on the radio. Like radio is still massive for country music, much bigger than streaming. But so it's like it's still important. It's still important, and it's going to be important for a long time, I think. But I do think that. It gets down to the fact that back in the day, that was the only way that we could consume music without purchasing a good and playing it. Now, obviously, people can play any song they want on demand as long as they have a streaming subscription. So there's definitely there are different options for different consumer profiles, if that makes sense. But radio is going to remain important because we forget, because we're all big music fans, but there are a lot of people out there that want the decisions to be made for them.
It's really interesting having these conversations, and I'm thankful because at a few moments you brought me back to a wider picture. And when I'm talking to my manager or I'm talking to someone like Blau or you, we are like, I forget that we are really just really nerdy and we really are hyper obsessed with DSPs. We're talking about NFTs like they should be adapted next year. I'm thinking, when I find a radio accomplishment, I get an email from the label. It doesn't make me feel a certain type of way because I don't stream or listen to radio personally. But it's interesting hearing you say things like this, like, hey, I know when you go on Clubhouse and you see the NFT rooms, not a lot of people are on Clubhouse talking about NFTs. And hey, country music's really big on pop radio. The average person doesn't maybe want to discover music. They want to be given a playlist or given radio. And it's interesting. We got to sometimes take a step back when we're really deep in this world. The dome gets really dark, and we could forget that there's a big world out there,
Totally.
So, final question. We talked about AR and VR. We're seeing a bit of virtual concerts and of virtual shows with VR. Maybe AR will get there, but at what point, if it will get to a point where VR and AR concerts actually impact the live industry, where the dent is felt, that people are experiencing something at a high enough level, at a safe enough level where that VR show is streaming live here and promoters are worried because they have an in-person show across the street,
Again, the short answer, the easy answer is sooner than we think. I think COVID accelerated things it really significantly. Like I think 5 to 10 years of progress in 1 year in terms of like mainstream adoption, understanding of these platforms and technologies. But again, like I also think that part of it is, again, it's the and versus the or. It's like, I don't know that people are going to go to VR to get instead of going to a live show. I think they're going to go to VR to get something that they could never even get live. You know what I mean? And I think those are the artists like that are doing the coolest things, are people who are thinking, and the artists who have done the best, like streaming, streaming during the pandemic, or people who didn't just like do a DJ set or do a normal show, but thought about it as an opportunity to do something super unique and amazing. Like, great example, what Rihanna did with Savage X Fenty for the most recent video that she dropped. Like, you could, like, it was made for that format. You could never do, like, that wouldn't have just worked as a normal fashion show on a stage. It was made for the TV camera. She did something super unique. So, like, that was something that, like, it's in like a whole other area than like, you wouldn't say, I'm going to go to this, I'm going to watch this instead of going to New York Fashion Week. You're going to do both because you're going to see something there that you couldn't see there. And then obviously, like, we go to events for much more than just like consuming the out in music, there's a community aspect, there's a social aspect, and we're all really missing that obviously right now with COVID. So again, like, but I think a point to be taken is that you look at like the rise of streaming and VR and AR, like this adoption was moved forward significantly because of COVID.
To celebrate the new podcast, I'm giving away a PlayStation 5 to one of my viewers. All you have to do is like and subscribe. That's it. Full details in the comments. Good luck.